Hey everybody. As you're in the process of revising your Q3, I just wanted to make a quick video kind of going through the four prompt choices and just kind of giving you some advice based on trends I've seen between the two classes. Obviously, after this intro, if you want to kind of scroll to the portion of the video that pertains to your prompt, that would make the most sense unless you're planning on switching your prompt during the revision stage. So first of all, before we get started, I would like to just say a lot of improvement in terms of just kind of people's gut reactions this second time around compared to your summer reading Q3. So some good things happening, and really, this revision process, it's much more about just trying to refine things and, make it better than people being just super off base or anything like that. So let's start with the 2002 prompt. 2002 prompt was one of the more popular choices, and obviously it says morally ambiguous characters, characters whose behavior discourages readers from identifying them as purely good or purely evil, are at the heart of many works of literature. Choose a novel or play in which a morally ambiguous character plays a pivotal role. Then write an essay in which you explain how the character can be viewed as morally ambiguous and why his or her moral ambiguity is significant to the work as a whole. Avoid mere plot summary. So the first thing that I just kind of want to make clear here is when it says moral ambiguity is significant to the work as a whole. We're talking theme here. It's always theme with these Q3s, and it's going to be a universal theme. In other words, something that is present, like a lesson or a moral or a takeaway that is present from looking at Troy and Fences in this case, but something that could also be present in situations outside of just Fences. So in this case, it's going to be something about what Troy's moral ambiguity can show us about parenting or family history or how the past impacts the present and the future, or to what extent good motivations gone about the right way can erode our morality, something along those lines. Really, most people, their essay was pretty straightforward here. The only thing that I would kind of say is you want equal time for both here. You want to spend equal amounts of discussion on kind of where the moral failings of your character are, as well as kind of the redeeming characteristics. And for a lot of people, one of the problems was that they kind of went, kind of just bounced around in terms of the chronology of the play. And so I'd say my first piece of advice here, obviously, is focus on universal theme. And then my second is decide on whether you want to start with moral failings that are then redeemed, or moral, I guess you could say, positive characteristics that are then eroded. Because if you're just kind of alternating, it can kind of make your essay feel structurally like it's all over the place. So let's see. So I would say for a lot of people, going chronologically, kind of as a reader, is a good way to go here. So in other words, kind of talking the reader through kind of your reaction to the character. And for Fences, for most people, we're predisposed not to dislike Troy from the beginning, but then like the first few interactions with Corey kind of impact are viewing. Some people positively, some people negatively, like when they're having the discussion about like buying the TV and stuff like that. And then, we kind of get this perspective of Troy's childhood, and that might affect our viewings a little bit. But in whatever you decide to do, kind of in terms of whether you're starting with moral high ground or moral shortcomings, going chronologically through like your reader reaction isn't necessarily a bad approach. The only other thing that I would say here with this particular prompt is you want to make sure that you end in your conclusion with kind of what we can learn from the character. Really, that in a way is kind of what your universal theme is supposed to be. And so you definitely don't want to just kind of leave it as, blah, 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 this is what happens, and then Troy dies and leave it there, because that will make your essay feel like it just kind of is really summary heavy. So I'd say conclude with what one can learn from Troy and his ambiguous morality. And if you are a 2002 prompt person, you can probably kind of segue off. Some of what I'm going to talk about with 2003 and 2005 and 10 will overlap, but a lot of it are kind of distinct to the prompts, and that's kind of the point of this video. So 2003 people, welcome if you kind of were trying to find this moment in the video. And basically, for your 2003 prompt, this was the tragic hero prompt. And so most people kind of made the decision that this prompt is not really asking you to argue whether Troy is a tragic hero, like kind of what our discussion question was initially. Instead, it's kind of assuming that he fits at least well enough for that label to kind of stick, and it's focusing more on his impact on other characters. So if we're looking through here, obviously our prompt language says tragic heroes are so much the highest point in their human landscape that they seem the inevitable conductors of the power about them. Great trees more likely to be struck by lightning than a clump of grass. Conductors may, of course, be instruments as well as victims of the device of lightning. So first piece of advice that I would have for you guys is obviously you can see just from the prompt choices, not every single prompt here has a reference quote. So in this case, you've got actually a pretty long one with a lot to kind of unpack in there. So I would encourage you to reference, at least in passing, the critic quote. There's too much there for you to just kind of start and not ever circle back to it. Secondly, when we kind of get back into the prompt after the quote, we've got obviously the language: select a novel or play in which a tragic figure functions as an instrument of the suffering of others. Then write an essay in which you explain how the suffering brought about upon others by that figure contributes to the tragic vision of the work as a whole. So most people, they kind of put together that, okay, so this whole part about how the character causes the suffering or brings upon suffering by others probably means that you're going to focus on at least two different characters. And then really, I think a lot of people were kind of like, okay, so what exactly does this part, the tragic vision of the work as a whole, what is that really asking me to do? Is it asking me to kind of defend how it fits within a tragedy? Is it asking me to explain how the play has elements of sadness? What exactly is this trying to ask me to do? And so my third piece of advice for this prompt is kind of like if you watched any of the 2002 video before you got here. Tragic vision in this case is universal theme. They always like to kind of change up that language a little bit in each of these prompts. But tragic vision is universal theme in this case. In other words, what is it about the play? What can we learn from the play about um, the suffering of others and the cause behind it? So, what can Troy and his behavior specifically teach us about people, human nature, parenting, uh, our goals versus how we execute on our goals, anything along those lines? Um, Otherwise, I would say basically, I mean, this prompt is relatively straightforward, but I would say you do want to re-reference the quote, or at least the concept behind the quote, in your conclusion paragraph. All right. 2005 Form B is what we're tackling next. 2003, if you want to kind of go about and take stock of any questions you might have for office hours. 2005 B people, if you're just coming on now, welcome. So 2005 Form B. This is sort of the power struggle prompt. And so with this one, relatively short in terms of the language compared to some of the others. And it obviously just reads, one of the strongest human drives seems to be a desire for power. Write an essay in which you discuss how a character in a novel or drama struggles to free himself or herself from the power of others or seeks to gain power over others. Be sure to demonstrate in your essay how the author uses this power struggle to enhance the meaning of the work. So, the first thing to kind of note here is, unlike some of these prompts, there is no intro quote this time around. Um, so, a lot of people, I think, compared to the last prompt, you kind of were like, okay, like, how do I start then? And a lot of people, your solution was to kind of just throw your thesis in there without a lot of kind of background information. So I would still encourage you to still reference some part of this statement, even though there's no like direct critic behind it this time. But I would encourage you to kind of re-explain the opening statement in your own words. Then honestly, it was kind of 50-50 in terms of kind of the direction people went with this prompt, because notice with this one, um, there's ors, there's not ands. So don't feel like your essay has to do everything. Um, in other words, a essay that discusses how Corey tries to break free from Troy's power, focusing on Corey specifically as kind of the central character for the purposes of your examination, that'll get the job done. Same with a essay that focuses on Troy and how he attempts to keep power over his family, kind of focusing on him as the central figure. With that, or that'll get the job done. Um, and lastly, I've had a few people that wrote their essay basically about Troy and the things that he was trying to break free from. And that has the potential to be a really interesting essay. The only thing I would say is, if you're focusing on Troy breaking free from some kind of power, make sure that you are as specific as you can be about what that power is, or who or what had the power that he's trying to break free from. In other words, um, is it his childhood? Is it his the influence of his father? Is it responsibility? Is it himself? Is it his past? You get what I'm getting at. I mean, obviously, it can be any one of those things. It can probably be something more than what's just on this list. But you want to be able to have something. If you not a someone, then a something that he is trying to break free from. If you approach the essay as he's just trying to break free, but then all you really have is I don't know, ways he's dissatisfied with his life, it has the effect of being kind of summary heavy. 2010 prompt people. 2005 people, if you want to kind of formulate your questions and consider having them ready for office hours, that's fine with me. 2010 people, if you scrolled to this point in the video, welcome. First of all, 2010 people, I do feel like your prompt is by far the most complex on this list. So kudos for not taking the easy way out in terms of your prompt choice, because I do think this prompt, since it is the most recent, is probably the closest in terms of language and structure to what you're likely to see on the 2021 exam. I also think that there's a lot to unpack here. The language of the prompt, I feel like, is more complex in this particular instance. So obviously we've got a opening quote this time around, and it says Palestinian American literary theorist and cultural critic Edward Said has written that exile is strangely compelling to think about, but terrible to experience. It is the unhealable rift forced between a human being and a native place, between the self and its true home, and its essential sadness can never be surmounted. Whew, it's a mouthful of a quote, and we'll talk about that in a second. Yet Said has also said, too many saids, Said has also said that exile can become a potent, even enriching experience. Select a novel, play, or epic in which a character experiences such a rift and becomes cut off from home, whether that home is the character's birthplace, family, homeland, or other special place. Then write an essay in which you analyze how the character's experience with exile is both alienating and enriching, and how this experience illuminates the meaning of the work as a whole. Do not merely summarize the plot. Whew. So lots of stuff in this one. This one I feel like is similar to your summer reading Q3 in that there are a lot of different tasks that you're being asked to do in a relatively confined period of time. And unlike if you watched any of the 2005 video where they've got this nice little or thrown in where they can kind of pick a direction for their essay, you don't get that or. You get ands, which means you got to do all of it. So a lot of the problems that I saw with this prompt were people just kind of not necessarily throwing equal weight to each task that is here. So the first thing that I would say is with your opening quote here, it's almost 3 different quotes. This is part, then this is part, and then this third part, its essential sadness can never be surmounted, is almost kind of a third part. So I would say one piece of advice here, I would reference the opening quote, but maybe pick a key part of it because it's a mouthful and there's kind of different, implications in each part. So maybe pick a key part of it. Secondly, you want to keep an eye on your tasks because you've basically got 3 for this one. The first is you need to discuss how exile or even alienation or some synonym thereof can be enriching or seem positive. A lot of people kind of talked about there were kind of 2 different directions people went. A lot of people talked about Troy basically self-imposing exile on himself by leaving his childhood home and its positivity at the time, as kind of a enriching, at least in a moment, experience. And then other people, they talked a little bit about Troy's actual kind of departure from his immediate family of Rose and Corey, obviously with the affair. And I think either direction could work. So then obviously the second task is discuss, I guess you could say, a turning point in the exile or alienation. In other words, when is it no longer positive? And then the third is to link this concept of exile, to a universal theme. Because when it says illuminates the work of the meaning of the work as a whole, that's always going to be the universal theme. What it is about the characters and the example that you brought up that is applicable to examine in the broader world or ourselves or other situations. So we'd say discuss how positive and negative exile show us a universal theme. In other words, a moral lesson, takeaway, broader than just fences. And honestly, for a complex prompt, many people did a good job of at least kind of this attempt. But there is a lot to unpack in this particular prompt, given that compared to some of the other two, there really are kind of three distinct tasks in this prompt rather than just kind of one or two that are present in the rest. So I hope this video was somewhat helpful. Obviously, because we had so many prompts, I didn't want to make this something that just went on and on and on. I would encourage you to check out some of the example essays for your prompt. I know it's not necessarily going to be about fences, but it might give you some ideas for structure and scoring and things like that. And then do feel free to pop into office hours today, tomorrow, or Monday before you have to submit if you've got anything that you kind of want to discuss more personally with your essay specifically. So thanks for listening. Hope you got something out of it, and I will talk to you all soon.